All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this EPIP webinar. My name is Michael Barham. I'm joining you from EPIP National Headquarters. This webinar is Navigating Shifting Sands, where we all can learn from Jewish charitable giving. It'll surely be a fascinating conversation. We have an esteemed panel here, and we're really excited to get started. As you can see, we're doing something new. We're doing a video webinar for the first time, so hopefully you'll enjoy that as well. So first, for those of you who are not familiar with EPIP, just a little bit about what we are and who we are and what we do. We're emerging practitioners in philanthropy. We're a national network of foundation professionals and social entrepreneurs who strive for excellence in the practice of philanthropy. Our mission is to develop emerging leaders committing to build a just, equitable, and sustainable society. A couple of pertinent EPIP announcements. We've recently launched our 7-part video series. It's entitled Doing Good in the 21st Century. It's an exploration of how we react to the changing philanthropic landscape, and it features a number of distinguished members in the field and EPIP members as well. So we encourage you to check that out. It's epip.org/doinggood. We also encourage you to join our next webinar. It's December 4th, and it's entitled A Democratic Philanthropy, Different Perspectives on Funding, hosted by our very own Christine Reeves of NCRP, also an EPIP board member. And if you are interested in developing a webinar this year, or for 2014, we're open to ideas, so please contact us. Michael@epip.org. You can use my email. We're happy to help you develop that and partner with you on that. And lastly, just a few items for housekeeping. To ensure our audio quality, we're going to make sure all participants are on mute. If you are calling in on the phone, please make sure to mute your computer. If you have questions that you'd like the panelists to discuss, we'll make time for that at the end. So please type your questions in the question box throughout. And if you do have any problems arise, use the raise your hand feature. You'll see that on your control panel. So lastly, please keep in mind this webinar will be recorded. So if you do need to hop off, you'll be able to come find it. You can contact us with that. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, Sean Landris. Sean, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. I want to make sure that let's see that we've got this going. Here we are. That's great. Well, I'm so pleased to have all of you here. This is an exciting webinar this morning, and we're very happy to be sharing not only the results of the Connected to Give project, but really the process by which it has unfolded and is continuing to unfold. My name is Sean Landris. I'm the co-founder and CEO and director of research of Jumpstart, which is a philanthropic research and design lab based in Los Angeles. And I'm thrilled to have with me 3 of my closest collaborators on this project and in so many other ways. Dr. Jeffrey Solomon is the president of the Andrea and Charles Bronfman Philanthropies in New York and is co-founder of the Connected to Give project. I will be coming back to him first. Sarah Indick in Denver is the philanthropic services manager at the Rose Community Foundation in Denver, and in that role she has led a number of exciting young adult initiatives at Rose and has served on the research review committee for the project. And Robin Smoller in Atlanta, Georgia is the director of communications for the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation, and as you can imagine, she has been helping lead our communications effort. So we really have a variety of perspectives to share with you today. And again, I want to encourage you to visit connectedtogive.org for the reports. You'll see the most recent report on the main screen. You can click on reports to get all of the reports that have dropped so far. And this coming Monday, we're very excited to be releasing Connected to Give Faith Communities, which looks beyond the world of Jewish charitable giving, in fact, to look at religion and giving across American society, with a focus on the religious identity of donors and organizations alike. So we're very excited about that. But let me just give you the brief summary of Connected to Give. Again, I don't want to repeat what's in the reports because you can have the opportunity yourself to download it from connectedtogive, all one word, .org, and we'll display the website again at the end. If you're live tweeting this for any reason, it's #ConnectGive, and we're happy to have you do that. There are three key takeaways from Connected to Give that I want to just sort of share with you up front, and then we'll turn it over to Jeff to start the conversation about how this whole project got underway. One key takeaway that I think everyone is talking about is the importance of literally connection. Connection for Jewish donors to their communities, to their Jewish communities, being leading factor in what drives charitable giving by American Jews, whether to non-Jewish or Jewish causes. And the importance of that social engagement, whether it's having a Jewish family, or having Jewish friends, or volunteering for a religious or charitable organization, or going to synagogue services. Those are the four measures that we used to understand social engagement. That really is a particular driver here. And the takeaway for us is that your stakeholders, if you're listening to this webinar and you are a fundraiser, the key question in your mind should be really, how are you connecting your stakeholders to one another, to community in general, and to your organization, not for the transactional purpose of making a gift, but for the purpose of actually building community, because that's the strongest driver of their engagement and their financial engagement overall. The second takeaway is that it's not either or. I just said earlier that connection to Jewish community is a key driver for giving not only to Jewish causes, but to non-Jewish causes as well. And that's a critical lesson, I think, from this study, that that giving and I think this is true across religious organizations, that we'll be talking about this more next week, but giving to Jewish community organizations is not about giving to the Jews as opposed to giving to everybody else. I want to make that really clear. And we heard loud and clear from our donors who responded to this study, and it was a nationally representative study of nearly 3,000 American Jews and nearly 2,000 non-Jewish Americans. We heard loud and clear that it's a both-and conversation for them. And any suggestion that they should be giving to one or the other is not a suggestion that's going to be taken very well. And again, that's a message for fundraisers, but also for programmers who are looking for opportunities to engage their stakeholders in meaningful activities, both within and beyond the community context. The third takeaway, so connection is the first takeaway, the both and message is the second takeaway, and the third takeaway, again, many of you who are on this webinar are reaching out not only to individual donors, but also to foundations. The third takeaway, call the mega donor conversation. What we is a goal of potential and power and dynamism in the individual giving for their peak income years, their peak engagement years. This is a group of people who have household incomes roughly $50,000 to $200,000. They are the core drivers of Jewish charitable giving in America. And when we look at the rhetoric around the Jewish community, and we look at the rhetoric, I think, in many charitable organizations, we see a heavy focus on major donors, and in particularly in the Jewish world, I think we see a heavy focus on donors who can give what is perceived to be lots and lots and lots of money. And I want to stress that the Connected to Give findings really show that the donors who are doing whether it's $500 or $1,000 a year, those are the key base for any sustainable charitable organization and any sustainable cause, and that's a critical message. And we're looking about connection. We're looking at both and we're looking at beyond the mega or major donor to that core base of Jewish donors, who include, by the way, young people, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later. What I'd like to do now is turn it over first to Jeff Solomon. Jeff is the co-instigator, co-catalyst of this whole project. And since many of you are interested in collective impact and collaborative funding, we thought it would be helpful to hear from Jeff about how this whole thing came together.
Thanks, Sean. I've been asked to try to focus on 5 questions. What moved us to co-found Connected to Give? Why a consortium of funders? What were some of the surprises and challenges in assembling a consortium? Why Jumpstart as our leaders in this process? And now that the findings are rolling out, what are the challenges and opportunities for moving from data collection to action? It begins really with a disconnect that I've been troubled with for some time. That being the disconnect between philanthropy in general increasingly being about impact and innovation, and Jewish philanthropy continuing a long tradition about being about obligation. And that disconnect troubled me a great deal as somebody who cares about the Jewish community, and a significant part of our work as a foundation is within the Jewish community. And in consulting with the Jumpstart team, it became clear that there's never been a study of American Jewish givers, and that by putting a mirror up to the community and providing that mirror to nonprofit organizations that work within that community, perhaps indeed we can move into the 21st century in terms of philanthropy. We chose to do it, one, like most foundations, leverage is great. 2, and much more significantly, this is to be a community organizing effort. It is not simply an effort at providing data. And as a community organizing effort, the more funders, both public charities such as federations and private foundations that became the sponsors and supporters of it, the greater the likelihood that their constituencies and beneficiaries would take the results seriously. And indeed, in trying to organize the consortium, the biggest surprise was that for many it became a no-brainer. It really was a delight to see so many sign on so quickly, because it spoke to them as it spoke to Jumpstart and us. The challenge, perhaps, although not necessarily a surprise, for a number of traditional foundations, they were not concerned with that disconnect that I described. They were focused on traditional donors primarily, and why study anybody else? And if there was a surprise in that, it was the absolute transparency in that position. And those who are not at the table with this consortium, for the most part, many of them were very clear as to why they chose not to be at the table. Using Jumpstart was important to us for a number of reasons. One, Jumpstart is really a support organization that helps innovators, but equally importantly, helps funders navigate the shoals of innovation, the shoals of impact within the Jewish community and beyond. And therefore, they just seemed like a logical partner as the administrator of the projects. And this is, a key part of consortia. They're fun to be with. One of the things when I came to a private foundation 17 years ago, a very wise man came up to me and said, "You now have a position where you can work with people that you want to work with." And that's a real privilege, and certainly our work with Jumpstart underscores that privilege. And then finally, what are the challenges now that the data is rolling out? I think the challenges are to really help public charities within the Jewish communal field and beyond understand the implications of the data and understand and providing them with a toolkit of how to become more effective in development so that they have the necessary resources to fulfill their mission.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. If I could ask a follow-up, you have had a great deal of experience at ACBP with commissioning research that you have turned, that has shaped the communal conversation within the Jewish world. Sometimes you've used a backbone organization, and thank you for your kind words about Jumpstart. Sometimes you've actually run that in-house. Is there anything that you could add for the folks on this webinar about the relative, those choices, and also what you think has made the difference for one project or another, and this need not be about Connected to Give, in terms of that, that beginning of that research process, launching a conversation in that way, since you've done it quite frequently?
I think that the one theme that runs through all of the research that we've done, and we've done it with Frank Luntz, with the Greenberg firm, we've done it with Mark Mellman. These are not traditional Jewish pollsters, and we were very deliberate and criticized roundly for using non-traditional sources. But it provided what I think is an important component. Many people who are in the field of sociology and anthropology will give you the answer to your questions if you wake them up 3 o'clock in the morning. And the data almost follows those answers. And the team that was assembled to conduct the Connected to Give research is an absolutely world-class team. And it was supplemented by experts in Jewish community issues. But the team, both in terms of the qualitative research and the quantitative research, are just extraordinary. And as we're seeing in the planning of the rollout, the communications is as critical as the results.
Thanks. So let's turn on that note with the research and rollout to Sarah Indick in Denver. Sarah, you've been at this table for quite some time, and you've been thinking about what this means for your work.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm joining you from Rose Community Foundation in Denver, Colorado. And for those of you less familiar with Rose Community Foundation, we address enduring and emerging issues in the greater Denver Boulder communities through both our unrestricted grant making, but also donor advising and a portfolio of special initiatives. We make grants to support nonprofits in our local Jewish and broader communities. I've been at the foundation personally for 6 years. I'm part, as Sean mentioned, of our philanthropic services team. And in my role here, much of my work is focused on working with what we call collaborative giving groups, kind of our version of giving circles. And in that work, I spend a good deal of time working with emerging philanthropists. So people in their 20s and 30s, some people in their teens. And Rose Community Foundation, while we're not a Jewish organization, we do a significant portion of our work in our local Jewish community, both funding Jewish nonprofits and also supporting Jewish donors. So for us, Connected to Give really was a terrific opportunity to inform our work, but maybe more importantly, to inform the work of our grantees, to equip them with a better understanding of giving motivations and behaviors in the 21st century, and to help them with their development work. You might wonder why a locally focused funder would be so committed to a national study. And first, we are part of Connected to Give because we really believe that it would be valuable to understand giving behaviors nationally. This is a time, as Jeff mentioned, of change in giving behavior. It's also a time of extreme mobility. So in our community, 40% of Jewish people under age 40 are newcomers. The size, therefore, and diversity of the Connected to Give sample was very appealing to us. Additionally, co-investing and joining this consortium really provided much more bang for our buck. There's no way that we could have had the same level of research and analysis with an investment in a local study. And I want to stress that the way that Jumpstart led this process really created a working and learning consortium, not only a funding consortium, and so that's been really an incredibly valuable process for us as well. Our involvement has taken on a couple different forms. One of my colleagues who oversees the foundation's unrestricted grant making in the Jewish community served on the research committee from the very beginning. I've been involved as an early reader and reviewer, and also part of the foundation's investment in the study supported 2 focus groups in Denver, which some of my colleagues and I had a chance to observe firsthand. And if there's time later, I can share a little bit about that experience. But really, funding for research does not take up a significant portion of our grant making. In this case, we felt like it was a really worthwhile investment, and one we believe that will benefit our community, because so frequently we all do work based on assumptions about the world in which we work. And when we're lucky, like now, we're able to make those assumptions based on research and data. But when we're not so lucky, we end up generalizing and relying heavily on anecdote that may or may not be representative of reality. And as Sean and Jeff have both alluded to, the real value in research lies in its ability to correct or affirm our assumptions, to capture people's interest, and to catalyze a conversation that can advance the work we do. To that end, we're really fortunate because Sean will be coming to our community in January to help local Jewish nonprofits unpack the findings and start to put them to use in their work. And I hope if our community takes anything away from this report, it's one of Sean's first key takeaway, which I would sum up as connect first, ask later. Connected to Give really also reinforces the idea that the best way to get a bigger slice of the philanthropic pie is to grow the whole pie, and that one way we can all effectively do that is through community building work. So I'm really hopeful that as a result of this study, that's the direction that we'll start to move in more as a community. In terms of our work here at the foundation, Connected to Give has both affirmed some of our original assumptions, but also corrected others. And I'll just wrap up my comments with an example of each. So first, much of our work around engaging next-gen Jewish donors has been based on the premise that the experience of collaborative giving with a group of Jewish peers can inherently be a meaningful Jewish experience, even if the funds end up being granted to secular organizations. And thanks to Connected to Give, we now really know that this is the case. And we also know that the community building that happens within a collaborative giving group is philanthropically valuable in and of itself. It can create a virtuous cycle that can then lead to more giving. And finally, once someone becomes a donor, it's likely that they'll end up donating both to Jewish and non-Jewish causes. So in these ways, the study really affirmed the approach that we've taken, we were thrilled to find that out. And so we'll just keep doing some of the things we've been doing, maybe with a little bit more confidence. But some of the findings were a surprise to us, and I would assume surprise others as well. And one that really did surprise me, although maybe it shouldn't have, was that people, even people who give to Jewish organizations, don't tend to attribute their motivation for giving to Jewish values, nor are they particularly motivated by the idea of strengthening the Jewish community. And I think one of the reasons this surprised me is because appeals to Jewish values, or to the idea of strengthening the Jewish community through philanthropy, are ubiquitous in Jewish fundraising. And indeed, we as an organization have been guilty of some of that language at times ourselves. But when you ask people about what motivates their charitable giving, they attribute it to something much, much closer to home. They talk about their family's values, or they talk about their desire to help others. And so Connected to Give really revealed that even for people who are very connected to community, giving is a deeply personal expression and experience.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you say just maybe one more brief word about what you think your next steps, sort of your immediate next steps, are going to be? How are you? You mentioned that I'm coming to Denver in January, and I think that's one way of having sort of a transition from research to action. But I'm only going to be there for one day. What do you think will be your moves, so say over the next 3 months, in terms of bringing those learnings to the nonprofits?
You know, two questions that that we're really asking ourselves, and that I think our whole community hopefully will ponder, relate back to some of your opening remarks, Sean. One is the notion that people between age 40 and 64 are really in their peak earning and giving years, but that in order to really be successful in capitalizing on that, the relationships need to be in place far before then. And so one of our questions is, how do we need to shift our mindset when we approach people in their 20s and in their 30s to really focus on engagement and community building, and to be willing to take the long view? And that can be very challenging. Another is that, as you mentioned, Sean, Connected to Give sort of revealed the long tail of charitable giving. And with significant percentages of people at the lower end or middle piece of the income scale regularly giving away meaningful sums, $500, $1,000 each year, who may not consider themselves philanthropists or may not consider themselves funders. So what are we doing to really encourage and support that long tail? And to encourage people who have that capacity but may not be acting on it to jump in.
Absolutely. And I know, speaking personally, if I make a gift of the size that you just mentioned to a non-Jewish organization, typically the response that I get is, to be honest, a lot warmer and more engaging than the response that I get from many Jewish organizations. There is a certain elegance in the donor stewardship relationship that a number of Jewish organizations could stand to learn and to engage in the focus on donors at that middle level, really in the sort of $500 to $2,500 range, and that's an important conversation. I hope that will continue. In that light, which is the question of how do you communicate with anyone, really. I want to turn it over to Robin Smoller from the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation. And just by way of setup, I also want to say that we have had the great privilege of working with Hershey Cause Communications as our communications partner for the study. It would not look the way that it did. We would not be on this webinar. We would not be having the national conversation that we are having if it weren't for the experts at Hershey Cause, and I want to thank them. And note, in turning it over to Robin, that she was among the funders who helped us solidify that partnership as we were beginning to think about the rollout. A conversation that in fact started well before we even had the first draft of the report itself. So, Robin.
Thanks, Sean. Very kind introduction, and I'm really excited to be here today. So as Sean mentioned, I'm the Director of Communications for the Schusterman Philanthropic Network, and we really focus on 4 key areas: strengthening the Jewish people, Israel, public education in the United States, and our founder's hometown of Tulsa. And so in the Jewish community, we invest in creating and supporting opportunities to strengthen the identities and leadership capacities of young Jews to ensure that they'll take ownership for perpetuating vibrant Jewish life. And we were involved with Connected to Give from the outset, and you heard from Jeff about its genesis and how it evolved to include more than 15 partners. From our perspective, one of the things our founder has always said about her philanthropic work is that she's devoted to spreading the joy of Jewish living, giving, and learning. And we've spent a lot of time working on the living and learning aspects, and long believed we could do more to foster the giving aspect, especially among the young adults at the core of our work. And I don't think we're alone in this quest, as reflected in the report and in a Jewish philanthropic landscape that is often described as in flux. And in many respects, of the many areas of Jewish life that have been reimagined over the past 2 decades, philanthropy has received probably among the least attention. And so when our founder, Lynn Schusterman, signed the Giving Pledge in 2011, it was in part to recommit to finding ways to inspire Jewish giving at all levels, especially among young donors. And so we've really been exploring ways that we can build a sense of identity and community and global connectedness while also generating greater philanthropy for Jewish causes. So you can clearly see the intersection with the research that was done through Connected to Give. And so I got involved when we began to conceptualize how we'd roll out the study publicly. And I think it's been a really exciting project to work on for a few reasons. One, as has been discussed, it was filling a gap in the landscape. I mean, as Jeff said, there had never been a study of American Jewish givers on this level before. And so while the research both confirmed and validated, while also giving fodder for new thought on what many of us had long suspected, having that empirical validation is really, really important. And so from a communications aspect, I think we all knew the story would sell, so to speak, but the key is figuring out how exactly we wanted to sell it. And so the second reason is that we got to do something that we communications types like, but often don't have the patience for or don't have the opportunity to do, which is the focus groups. And so we got to test messaging, and some of the findings from those focus groups were very interesting, as Sarah mentioned, and had an application for us beyond actually the rollout of the study. And the third was, this was through our work with Hershey Cause, we got to roll out the study in a very different way. A short initial report with a multi-part series over a long period of time. And I personally had never been part of rolling out a study in this way, and I think it came with a lot of opportunities and, of course, a lot of challenges. And it was exciting to be a part of. And so with this particular report, we had several phases to the rollout. One was the focus groups, as I mentioned. The second was the brand and messaging development. And the third was the actual outreach itself, which included a mix of traditional media, conferences, webinars, social media. I think research is especially challenging from a communications aspect because it's both critically important and often not easily digestible for people. So that means that there's a lot of great research out there that people aren't using because it's written and packaged in a way that's just inaccessible. And so we at our foundation have spent quite a bit of time thinking through, well, how do you make research accessible to more people? How do you get it into the hands of people who are really going to drive change? And so last year we did the Jewish Organization of Quality Index with the Human Rights campaign looking at inclusivity policies and practices of Jewish organizations. And we wanted to put that report in the hands of constituents who are going to challenge the policies and practices of their organization. And you can't do that with a 100-page academic report. And so you have to think about different approaches and different tactics and different language and ways of packaging the information. And so we ended up creating a series of infographics that really made it digestible for people. And so I think with this particular report, we broke down the rollout, from my perspective, into 3 constituent parts. The first is information. So what do people need to know? And the reports really serve that purpose, and they are intentionally descriptive, as Sean says, not prescriptive. And so that's really helpful. The second piece of it is education. How do people apply the information to their work? And we're looking at that, and some of the things that have been mentioned, things like toolkits and creating ways for people to actually translate the findings into actionable items that they can apply to their work. And the third piece is activation. What do you actually want people to do? And this works on 2 levels, which is activating people to download the report, and also activating them to act on the findings. And so the latter, I think, is different for everybody who's involved in the consortium, depending on what your goals are. For us, we want to activate people, especially young Jews, to give. So a key finding for us, obviously, is that many younger Jewish donors are finding a sense of connectedness through giving and making contributions through innovative philanthropic vehicles like giving circles and crowdfunding and text messages and online voting. And so while we were already thinking about and playing in this space, it was an indication to us that these models hold a lot of promise, and we could really sort of leverage them to activate more people to give. And so one of the findings for us, is helping us explore how we can activate people through models like giving circles to foster a sense of Jewish community among participants, and ultimately to ensure a vibrant future for Jewish philanthropy. So I think the information, education, activation formula was a big part of this rollout for us.
Robin, you mentioned the opportunity and challenge of a multi-phase of a multiple rollout report, right? At the same time that you noted the challenge of getting people to absorb information. In terms of keeping various constituencies engaged, and specifically, I want to dovetail with what you said by pointing out that we talked about the 2 different audiences, right? One of the things that the focus groups showed us was that professionals were engaging with the material and very differently from your lay reader or your donor in the street. What do you think are some of the challenges and opportunities associated with the rollout and keeping those different audiences actively engaged in the material?
Yeah, so I think that's sort of the million-dollar question that comes along with communications and outreach with any type of project, which is, and it's more art than science, and it's the big burst versus the slow build. So when you want to roll something out over an extended period of time, the big burst model is probably not going to work all that well. You have to think about pace and saturation and sustaining engagement throughout. And I think that there's a couple of pieces of it. One is, first of all, understanding your end goal. And starting there, what is it that you want people to walk away knowing or do differently? The second piece is breaking down the audience into its constituent parts, like we did with the focus groups, identifying their needs and finding the intersection between their needs and the action you want them to take. And the third piece for me is, marry the traditional with the unconventional. So yeah, issue the press release, do media outreach, but also think about the toolkits and the videos and the infographic. Information, education, activation model. So you may start with the information piece, move into an education phase, and then end up at the activation part. And so I think it's really about creating a plan that has peaks and valleys, as you say, and that is about creating sustained engagement over time with people, understanding that there are going to be ebbs and flows in it.
Great, thanks. I know that we're about to lose Jeff Solomon, who has another engagement that starts just before our webinar ends. So I want to before Jeff leaves us, I want to ask you if you have any reactions to what you've just heard, and more broadly, what you might do differently next time.
Sitting and listening to it is a true pleasure, because it really, you can see how aligned this team was, and how Sarah and Robin bring to the table their own viewpoints, their expertise. And while we often give lip service to the power of the many, and I give Jumpstart credit for organizing the participants in the way that they did, so that there really was synergy in this collaboration. The way the rollout was done, the local versus national issues, the qualitative research building upon the quantitative research, all of these things we should not take for granted, and listening to the two of you reminded me of that.
Would you do anything differently next time?
It's a great question. I would try to bring some more people to the table next time. I think there are some people who are sorry they weren't at the table this time, because they, we all have as those of us who are funders, have to create cynical-free zones for ourselves occasionally. And this required a cynical-free zone, and then it morphed into something about which there was no cynicism. There is no cynicism, and that's pretty special. And so I would get my special cynical-free ray gun out next time to bring some more people to the table.
Yeah, I think, we haven't mentioned, and Robin, when you were talking about burst versus slow build, we haven't mentioned this other study that came out at the beginning of October, which was the Pew Forum study of American Jews. And one is, of course, if we had gone it with a burst in early September, we really would have had no opportunity to pick up the ball after Pew rolled out in the same way. But we actually have new material coming out next Monday. Someone asked earlier, what about other religions? And we'll have that for you next Monday. Check out Connected to Give. If you register now, we'll email you the link when it's out. And then the report on collaborative giving that will be coming out, I believe, in late January. December, actually next month, we'll be talking about synagogues and denominations. But more than that, one of the things that strikes me, and I, before we open it up for questions, wonder if anyone wants to comment, is that we've got to react. Our group has reacted, our consortium of researchers and funders working collaboratively. I want to make clear, the funders didn't just write checks. They sat at tables. They participated in committees. They helped shape the questionnaire. They reviewed the material. It was a very active role. And for those of you on the call who are members of EPIP and others, this was, for me, this was a great opportunity to engage people working in the foundation sector across all of their extraordinary skill sets. Writing a check, it's actually kind of easy, right? You just sort of write the check. It's everything else that that takes the decision-making process, the thoughtfulness, the reflection, and the cross-communication that is the art of philanthropy that we've benefited from so much here. But our reactions to the research, I think, have been we haven't seen big fights. We haven't seen and we've seen the same kind of, oh my goodness, what do we do now? Response from Connected to Give that we've seen in a degree from Pew, and I wondered whether anyone had any thoughts on that. And then we want to open it up for questions.
Well, I have one thought to share. So I think a lot of it really is in the framing and the perspective that we are encouraged to take when viewing new information. And Connected to Give was presented from the beginning as a tool and as a set of information that was designed to give us a path forward and to help inform our work and take it to a new level. I don't have the Pew report in front of me, but it wasn't presented, and Robin, this gets to a lot of points you were making about how we communicate research in a digestible and actionable way. The person who wrote and released that report was doing it really as research for research's sake and wasn't trying to convey that there's a path forward for us here. And in fact, there is, of course, with both. There's obviously a path forward, but I think you have to do a little bit more legwork yourself to get there.
Robin, Jeff?
I thought that was very well said. And I have nothing more to add.
Great.
I second what Jeff said. I think Sarah spoke for all of us.
Yeah.
It's very well said.
Yeah. Research and knowledge management. I don't see any questions in the bar, but if folks have them, we'd be happy to take questions. If you go to the question bar and type in your questions, we will see them. I will read them out. Ah, you sent one. Let me see. Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier, right? So there was a question about whether the findings of the report would be similar through the lenses of other religions and whether we will be investigating that through a parallel report. That is what is coming out on Monday. It's going to be called Connected to Give Faith Communities. Our research on religions and non-affiliated Americans, other than Jews, has proven very, very insightful, and we will be sharing those results. They'll be out next Monday. So if you go to connectedtogive.org, register, we will make sure that you get that link. But I do have a strong sense that we will see some fairly similar findings, although there's some nuance to the multi-religious report that I think is very important. So the research report is available at connectedtogive.org. If you go to that website, you will see the most recent report, which is actually on legacy giving, available, and you can click on reports in the menu to pick up the first report as well as the frequencies from the other report. I'm going to do a little screen sharing here in the hopes that this will you can see the website and copy it out. Let's hope that this works. Here we go. I hope you all can see that. That's where the reports are available. Yes, there's a question about where this webinar will be available for people to view. Michael, do you have instructions on where people can find the webinar after the recording is completed?
We'll be making the webinar available on the EPIP website, so people should keep a lookout for that, and we'll make sure to send an email to all participants with instructions for them to access that.
Great, thank you. And that's epip.org, right? epip.org.
Yes, sir, you got it.
Fantastic. Other questions? Sarah or Robin, while we're waiting for other questions to come in, do you have, having heard one another, do you have thoughts that you'd like to add in terms of either the substance of the report, or I think more broadly your sense of what it's been like for you personally as you're right in the EPIP demographic. What's it been like participating in this consortium, and what are your takeaways that you think you'll be applying to your own personal work outside of this particular project?
It's very kind of you, Sean, to put us in the demographic. So we appreciate it. I think a couple things. I mean, I think when Sarah spoke about some of the surprises that she saw that came out of the focus groups, I think I shared those. This idea that talking about Jewish values wasn't a great way to inspire people, or that it wasn't about being grounded in a sense of strengthening the Jewish community. Even the word giving Jewishly wasn't necessarily positively perceived. And for us, we went back and looked at some of our language. And thought about, we often talk about Jewish values and giving Jewishly, and so it really gave me pause and went back and took a look at some of our language, and just really speaks to the importance of the language you use to convey messaging to people. And so I totally agree, Sarah, and shared your surprise at some of those findings, and found them very, very useful, very helpful. I think sometimes findings in research can confirm what you sort of anecdotally believe to be true, but that you still have an opportunity to really learn from the details of the findings. And I think that was true for us with a lot of the report, and this concept that of connecting community and identity and giving is really, really powerful, and something that we are digging into deeply in our work going forward. So
great. Sarah?
So